sugar. Oh, honey, honey, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you.
Hey everybody, I'm Kristen from Frosted Bake Shop, and welcome back to Cookie Class in a Box. This week we're having our lemonade stand, and it was inspired by that old adage that when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, and certainly the last few months we've been handed a lot of lemons. So hopefully today we can have some fun and make some lemonade cookies. In addition to our regular decorating lesson, there is a segment on how to improve your writing, and it gives you some tips about how to practice and your frosting texture and some other great things that will hopefully improve your writing game. So with that being said, hope you enjoyed today's lesson. So in today's lesson, you're basically going to have 3 different colors, and each of them is going to be in 2 different consistencies. So you want to make sure that when we start on a particular color that you're checking your bag and making sure that you're using the correct consistency. And the easiest way to really check is to make sure that you kind of give it a little squeeze. So for the green, you can see that the thicker writing consistency is firmer to the touch. You can see that it doesn't quite squish or spread in the bag if you tip it. Whereas your flooding, it's very squishy and it's gonna actually spread when you tip your bag. You can start to see that it spreads out. So we're going to start with our plaque because we do want the base white with the little lemon design around the edge to firm up pretty well before you do your text on top that says lemonade. I recommend letting this sit for at least a couple of hours, if not longer, a few hours, especially if you're not super comfortable with doing text, because you want to make sure that the top of your cookie is firm enough that you're not, in addition to worrying about, making sure that your hand's not shaking and you're piping correctly, that you're not pushing down into a cookie that's going to give way on you. So just keep that in mind. So before we start doing this, you're gonna want to cut the tips of your flooding white, your lemon yellow, the lighter lemon color, and then your flooding green, because that's what we're going to do the leaves in. And you're going to want to cut these tips on the smaller side for the yellow and the green, and the white can be on the medium side because that one's going to be used mostly for flooding. So once we start, you're going to want to make sure you're moving fairly quickly, because this is what's called a wet on wet design. So once we get our white flooded, we're going to go back very quickly with our yellow and our green to make the little lemon design. And what you're essentially wanting to do is make sure that that sort of sinks into the white so that you have a nice flat even coat. So we're going to just start by outlining our plaque. If you do that where you feel like it's not quite far enough to the edge, just go back. Now notice the way I'm doing this. When you're changing direction, I take my tip and kind of tap it down to where I'm changing direction, and that will help stop the flow of your icing. The other thing you'll notice is I'm not making sure that I go super close to the edge, and that is because this is flooding consistency. So if you go too close to the edge, you have the chance that it will run off. So now the way I like to flood is I do a second outline here, much thicker, I'm putting much more pressure on the bag as I'm outlining. Go around a second time. And then what I like to do is build a grid, basically like windows. And then I just go back and I literally fill in the windows. Now you're going to take your toothpick and just go around the edge. Make sure that your outline and the inside flood meet. And then I go back and I just sort of even out. This helps with any air pockets, and also helps if you for some reason have an area that is a little bit thicker. This will help so that when it settles, it's a nice, flat, even coat. Now we're gonna quickly transition to our yellow. You're gonna grab your darker yellow, and we're gonna start by basically making the end of ovals. And then do just a little bit of a tip. And you can kind of do these in any direction you want. There's really no pattern that you're following other than to fill up space. You want to make sure you're leaving space in the center, because that's where we're going to go back and do our text. Okay, now you can take your toothpick, and if you have any that you don't particularly love the shape, you can sort of correct that by pulling. This one, it didn't have the yellow completely filled in, so I could spread it out. Okay. I wouldn't worry too much about this, only because this is sort of just a pattern to give the illusion that we have all these lemons to fit in with our theme. What you're gonna wanna do though is get your leaves on before the white sets up too much, because then your leaves aren't gonna settle the way you want them to. And you can do as many or as few. And you're gonna just give it a squeeze and pull. And then we can go back with our toothpick and use the tip to pull those leaves if you don't like the shape. So I'm gonna do that before these set up. Just kind of pull them a little bit more. I can even add a little extra icing if I'm unhappy. Okay, so you'll see these will sort of settle in. Again, if you don't like the shape, you can play with it a little bit. And we're gonna put that one aside. Because we really want it to be firmed up enough that when we write on it, you can kind of take your time and not worry about pushing into it. So we're gonna do our lemonade cupcake. The first piece that we're really gonna focus on is our lemonade slice. And you'll see the consistent pattern that we're gonna do with any of these lemon slices, lemon wedges, whatever, is starting off with our darkest yellow, then doing a line of white, and then doing the inside with that lighter lemon yellow. And then we're gonna pull those colors together to give it the illusion that you have those sections of that you would see in a lemon slice. So we're gonna start with our dark yellow. Make sure you have your white and make sure that you cut your other yellow bag so that you can be ready to pull these together. Because again, when you're doing wet on wet, you want to make sure that you're ready to go. The other thing that I want to make sure that everybody realizes is when you take your toothpick, you're going to make sure you have a damp paper towel right next to you so that in between you're wiping off the color before you work on the next thing. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, and you can see I melded two different shapes together. I actually cut out a piece of this cupcake that would have been not that rounded shape right there. So you're gonna follow the edge of that to make basically a half moon, the outside of a half moon. And that's with your darker yellow. And I'm gonna just thicken it up a little bit. Now I'm gonna do a little bit thinner row of white, because that would be like the rind of your lemon. And I'm just sort of draping it right next to that dark yellow. And now we're going to finish this with our lighter yellow. And now you're gonna pull your white in. Now we're going to add our lines. So that we have the section. We're gonna let this set up for a while because when we go back, we wanna make sure that that slice of lemon really stands up off of our cupcake cookie. The first part that we're gonna start on is the bottom where our wrapper would be. So I'm gonna just follow the outline of the bottom. And you can see where the frosting would hit. So I'm going to just do a line straight across to connect. And then we're going to just follow that. And now we're gonna let this one set up so that we can go back and do our frosting without it running into that yellow. So the next cookie that we're gonna work on is our lemonade pitcher. So we wanna make sure that we are doing this in a couple different sections. We're gonna start with the stuff that will flow together and then come back and actually add the other sections so that it shows some definition and gives you some dimension on like what would be the glass of your pitcher. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make essentially a shadow of your lemonade pitcher. So when I do this, I'm just visualizing that our pitcher is kind of coming down straight and then gonna curve out to where the bottom of the pitcher would be. I'm gonna mark this for you so that you kind of have an idea of where I'm going with this. I wouldn't typically do this for like just a regular cookie, but I also want you to have a visual to kind of see where we're going with this design. So this part's gonna be a little rounded. Okay. So taking that into consideration, it doesn't really matter how full your pitcher is necessarily, as long as you're breaking it down in the correct sections. So the bottom is gonna be our light yellow, which is our lemonade. We are gonna have a section here where this indentation starts, where we're gonna make our, it's basically the shadow, the top of the lemonade. So just so you can kind of have an idea. If you want to go ahead and use the tip of your bag to drag it almost like you would a pencil to mark it, that's totally fine too, if you need a visual to work on. I just wanted you to be able to see where I'm going with this. So the first thing we're gonna do is fill in that sort of darker shadow. So it's not quite an oval, it's like a flattened oval. And we're gonna just fill it in. And then we're gonna level it out a little bit. Okay. The next thing we're gonna do is the bottom of that lemonade. So we're gonna follow what would be inside the glass. Now we are gonna go back and put a little white edge around it to kind of show the outline of the pitcher. So you're gonna wanna make sure that you're leaving space at the bottom, and then this top is gonna be all that white. when you outline again, you know, I've said this in lots of classes, but you're never dragging the tip of your piping bag across your cookie. You're really draping it, and you're using your other hand to guide where you're leaving the icing. Okay, and now I'm gonna just spread these together, but making sure to keep that nice sort of angle of the shadow. So you're just sort of pushing the icing so that it ends up sinking into that other yellow. I want to add some dimension and some interest to these. So I'm going to add a couple of lemon slices. First thing we're going to do is our half moon shape. And these would naturally float to the top, so that's what I'm doing. And again, the white rind would be against the dark yellow. And then what we're gonna do is actually pull the white through to give us some sections and to sort of close those lemon slices. I'm going to add a little of the lighter yellow because I don't like how much white is there. And then so that we can kind of show where they end, maybe a couple little seeds. Okay. Now I'm going to add some ice cubes. And you want to do some nice squares, but you kind of do want them to be going in different directions. And then I'm gonna just take my cookie, shake a little bit so that they settle. The other thing I'm gonna add here is like almost like a light shadow. So I'm gonna just take my white and follow the curve of my picture. The other thing we're gonna do is add the top of our picture, but we're leaving a section at the top because we want to show the dimension of where like the inside would be. So I'm going to do a straight line across. We're going to go back and fill that in after. We're going to follow the curve. And again, when we're doing it up against this other color, we want to make sure we're being cautious that it's just going right up to it, not on top of it. And I'm gonna thicken this line here just to cover the marker that I used to demonstrate for you guys. And blend that in together. Now we can set that aside. We'll come back later and we'll fill in the bottom and the very top, and we'll also add the handle. So the jar cookie is going to be very similar to the pitcher. So we're gonna do those back to back because you'll have already the idea of what you're supposed to be doing. So we're gonna do that same sort of squashed oval that shows the shadow where the top of the jar would be. So I'm going to start by just outlining the shape of the jar. And then we can go back and fill in that space. So just like our pitcher, we're gonna add some lemon slices and ice cubes to our mason jar. I'm gonna do one as a whole slice and the other one as like a half slice. So we're gonna start with a full circle of our dark yellow. And we're gonna do a half moon for our slice. We're gonna add our line of white. And some in the middle. And I'm gonna drag these in. To give that illusion. And then we can add a couple seeds in that slice. Now we're gonna add some ice cubes. The other thing I'm gonna add is just some little like air bubbles to the side. So I'm gonna do some bigger ones, sort of mixed in with some smaller ones. And this is really just, again, to add some interest to your cookie. And where these two icings come together, just make sure that you're being cautious. Give it a little shake to even it out. And we will go back and make some lines on there to give the top where you'd have that raised edge of your mason jar. We will come back and finish that. So our lemon, you're going to start off with your dark yellow, and we are going to add some little white dimension to it. So you want to make sure you have your white pretty handy. So the first thing we're going to do is follow the edge of your lemon. Now, notice this shape here on the bottom. We're going to mirror that as best as we can on the top, okay? So before I add any of my white to add dimension, I do want to make sure that my base coat is as sort of flat and filled out as I can get it. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to add just a couple little dots. And when you're doing this, you just really squeeze your bag the tiniest bit of pressure, and if you kind of watch, they will fade into your background. If they don't, in this case, it's actually not a terrible thing because it adds a little bit of texture to your lemon, which is what we're going for. So we're gonna let this set up and then we'll come back and add our leaves. I don't want to do it right now because as soon as I do my flood green, it would run into that yellow and we don't want that. Okay, so we're gonna work on our cupcake. And the first thing we're gonna do is make sure you have your little package of sprinkles handy, because we're gonna add some sprinkles to this as we're icing. So in order to get sort of that nice textured look where you can clearly see the difference in each of the layers of the frosting, we're going to start with working on the bottom and the very top, and then we'll go back in and we'll fill in the middle section. So I'm gonna start at this top, the bump here where this meets, and then we're gonna kind of swirl it down to meet on the other side. So if you wanna just run a line, here. And then we're gonna go back and we're gonna fill it in. If you want to add a couple sprinkles at the bottom, you can. I'm going to just add some sprinkles in the top and the middle section. So now we'll continue on to the top. So this, we're going to just kind of imagine that it would sort of follow the same curve that this bottom one did. And when you're doing the part around the lemon slice, you want to make sure that you're not adding a ton of extra icing, because you want that lemon slice to appear sort of like it's raised up or placed on the icing. So notice I didn't go too close to it, and then I'll go it back, and you can use your toothpick to sort of fill in the gap. So if you see any little space there, you can just, again, sort of pulling your icing in to meet it. Now I'm going to add a couple little sprinkles, not too close together. For a little extra color. So for our mason jar, really the big thing that we're going to do on this one is to add our extra lines at the top of our jar so that you can see some definition. We're also going to sort of outline the jar so you can see that there's what would be glass around your actual lemonade drink. You're going to use your white, thicker icing. You want to make sure that you do a nice fine point on this particular bag, because you're going to be doing your outlining and detailing with this. So when you're checking your bag, you want to make sure you have a nice thin line. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is outline our jar. And that kind of gives the impression that you have something in the glass jar. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do all those lines that form like the rims at the top. So we're gonna just carry this line up here. First one we're gonna do is this bottom lip. And we're actually gonna do 2 more lines. The first thing we're gonna do is like outline what would be the opening at the top, which is gonna be very similar to that sort of squashed oval shape. And now that gives you the guide for the 2 more lines that are gonna go in between here. And then we're gonna just connect the sides. And now that one's done. And now to work on our pitcher, we said we were gonna come back. I'm gonna use that thicker icing to outline the bottom. And I'm just gonna do like a good solid row across. And again, just follow this opening. again, just more pressure while you're filling in. And if you want to just make sure you're spread out. This is a pretty thick icing. Okay, we did talk about doing the handle. So we're going to follow the outside curve. And now we're going to follow that shape again. Trying to keep the same width for that handle. I outlined in the thicker, and now I'm going to go back in my flood and fill it in. And all I'm doing is making sure that that flood fills over to the side. I'm not getting rid of that outside layer, because what that will do is hold your icing up on your cookie. So I'm going to just follow the outline. So it has a little texture to it. And now that picture is done. So the first thing we're gonna do to detail our leaves is we're gonna do our flooding at the base of the leaf. What we wanna do is just sort of form the shape of the leaf and then go back in and flood it in to make a nice flat base so that we can add some detailing to it after. So we're just going to really follow the outline of each side. And then we'll go back in and we will flood it. Now I'm going to add just a little bit of detailing. Just the same way I added those couple little dots for my bottom of my lemon. I'm going to just do a couple little highlights. So we're just following the curve of the leaf. And then you can sort of pull the edges so that they come more to a point. And what we'll do is we'll come back and we're gonna add some detail on top when this firms up a little bit. So our lemon slice cookie, we're gonna start with our outline of our dark icing. And I'm gonna go around a couple times. You'll see I'll kind of do a thicker and I'm just gonna correct this. Now I'm gonna fill in with my lighter lemon yellow. I'm gonna fill in with my lighter lemon yellow. So now we have a nice smooth base to start on. You're gonna use your flooding white. So the first thing I wanna do is connect the white right where the dark and the light meet. We're gonna do a little bit in the middle. First thing we're gonna do is work on pulling this out. The next thing we're gonna do is just drag a little bit of this in because this is never perfectly smooth. And I'm just really trying to just grab the white. Now we're actually going to make our sections. So I'm gonna do one straight across. And if you have that problem where your line breaks, just go back, fill it in. I'm gonna just do a little bit more here because I really want so this, we're gonna add just a little bit of white here and we're gonna drag it a little bit to break it up, but just giving that illusion of those lemon sections that have that, those striations. there's our lemon slice. Now that we have our writing green, we're gonna just go back and do some accents. So I'm gonna follow what would be like the vein of the leaf, and then just add some of these details. And I'm being very careful not to touch down into my icing because I know that this is fresh flood and it would be very easy to push right down. But I like how that just adds a little extra dimension to my lemon. And now we can go back. We're gonna use our flooding white and we're gonna just work on our frosting for our cupcake. So we have the tiniest little part here that has to be filled in. And we're gonna just really outline this area again. Where it connects to this lemon slice, we're not going to get real heavy with the amount of icing. But these other parts, you can build it up. Because you want to see that definition. Okay, and then we'll, again, I'm gonna add some sprinkles to just add a little bit of extra color. I'm also gonna add some detailing on the bottom with my dark yellow. Now this yellow is a little thin, so just very sparingly you can do your lines. And there's our lemon cupcake.
Check on your lemonade plaque before starting the next section. If it's not firmed up enough, take a couple of hours and let it firm up before you start your writing.
So for our lemonade cookie, we're gonna use the thick green icing to write our lemonade message. I have included a little printed example of what your word lemonade will look like. You don't have to do it like that. If you feel more comfortable doing cursive, you can do cursive. If you want to try one of those fancier texts, like I showed you on your cookie writing practicing sheet, you certainly can do that. And this is your cookie, so I want you to be comfortable and be happy with the end result. So you have a reference sheet. If you want to put that right up here so you can kind of see how big your letters are supposed to be. The other thing that we talked about in the writing video, the writing portion, is spacing. So if you look at your cookie, this is sort of your midpoint right here. So your letters N and O are gonna naturally start here. Now, this font that you have is sort of a mix of large, small letters. So I picked that because it's not necessarily going to show a lot of problems if you don't do it perfectly correct.
Sugar, oh honey, honey, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you. Honey,
So you can see how we were already doing a mix of large.
sugar,
So there's your lemonade text cookie.
girl, and you got me wanting you. I just can't believe the loveliness of loving you. I just can't believe it's true. I just can't believe.
Thank you for joining us today at the Frosted Bake Shop. I hope you enjoyed our lemonade stand set, and we'll see you back in the next few weeks for a surprise ice cream thing, as well as our summer barbecue. So enjoy. Thank you.
And you got me wanting you. Oh honey, oh sugar, sugar, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you. When I kissed you, girl, I knew how sweet a kiss could be.